Wel, prynawn dar, croeso poib. Good afternoon, welcome to this multi-location meeting of the Cabinet Scrutiny Committee on the 19th of January 2023. I am Councillor Phil Rogers and I will be chairing this meeting. Please ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. In addition, when asked to raise your hand, if members who are virtually viewing this meeting could raise your electronic hand, and for those members in the council chamber, just raise your hand as normal. For the purpose of declarations, I would like to confirm that we'll be scrutinising items 5 and 6 on the Cabinet papers. Now we'll move on to declarations, agenda item 2. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? If any members have declarations in relation to any of the reports on today's agenda, can you please indicate it now? And Charlotte will forward you an electronic version of the form for you to complete and email back to her.
I don't see any indication, Chair.
Thank you, Charlotte. We'll now move to the Cabinet agenda for pre-decision scrutiny. As previously mentioned, we have decided to scrutinise items 5 and 6 on the Cabinet agenda. Moving to item 5, 2023 to 2024 budget proposals for consultation. The report is on pages 3 to 56. Please note the appendices that have been published and circulated yesterday. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
Yes, please, Chair, if I could. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the report in front of Cabinet today and for scrutiny now is the proposals in terms of the next year's draft revenue budget. If I take a little bit of time to talk members through some of the proposals so they get a better understanding. Obviously, members will be familiar with the proposals from the seminar we held last week, but there may be people on the call who were not able to attend. So if I turn members' attention to page 5 of the report, first of all, in terms of the estimated budget gap for next year, and members will note that in relation to the pay award for this year, which has added £12.5 million to our pay bill, actually, we only got funded 4% from the Welsh Government, so that gives us a budget gap before we start next year of £4.3 million. If I move on to page 6 of your pack, I talk about pay and inflationary pressures of £25.9 million for next year, and they are detailed in Appendix 1 of the report. And just to pick a couple of key ones out for members there. So we are forecasting at the moment that pay next year for staff will increase by 4%, but allowing an additional contingency of 2%, which matches this year's pay award. Members will see from the tables that the Fire Authority levy is currently forecasting to go up by 13% next year, and we've just been informed it may even be greater than that, so that will have to be addressed as part of the final budget proposals. That adds an extra £1.1 million onto the cost of running council services next year, just for the fire service. You will see that the cost of adult services placements is increasing by 12.2% next year, and this is predominantly due to the fact that the real living wage is increasing by around 10%. So that's adding £25.9 million onto the current cost of running council services. Also, members will see in Appendix 2 unavoidable service pressures of £11.9 million for next year. So if I just pick out some of the key items there, members will note that leisure services at an increased cost of £2.8 million. Some pressures in relation to adult and children's services for actual children who are currently placed in provision. So they are not actual predictions of increase in demand. They're actually placements that currently exist at the moment. Members will also note that there are 2 lines at the bottom of that appendix. One relates to £2.8 million that we're putting into a renewable energy transition fund, and £1 million that we are putting into the budget to deal with the fact that a number of specific grants for next year have been retained at this year's value or cut or haven't actually been disclosed as yet. So we are concerned around the risk of those specific grants. So if I turn to the page 7, members will see there the £42 million cost increases I've just outlined. The Welsh Government settlement was better than we expected at £18 million for next year. which is of great relief, but not sufficient to cover our cost pressures. So that leaves us a budget gap for next year of £23.8 million. Over the next few pages of the report, there are details around how we've looked at the principles in terms of how we're going to close that budget gap for next year. And in Appendix 3 of the report, there are £15 million worth of savings identified, which do not contain any cuts to services and protect jobs to the maximum extent possible. However, that still leaves us a significant budget gap for next year after pressures of over £8 million, which would equate, if we didn't do anything else, to a council tax increase of 14%. Now, obviously, we recognise at the moment that a 14% council tax increase would not be acceptable. So the proposal is that we're going to use some reserves next year to try and reduce that ask on the council taxpayer. So the report is seeking approval to utilise £3.5 million from the council's general reserve balance next year, which would take the balance down to £16.5 million as it currently stands. However, that doesn't take into account of any adjustments relating to this financial year. And that exceeds the 4% target that was approved by Cabinet back in January. There's also a proposal to utilise £1.4 million from specific reserves to help mitigate that increased cost of running indoor leisure services, meaning we can keep centres open throughout the year. So I think, Chair, that's probably everything I wanted to say in terms of the position for next year. The request today is to go out for consultation. The consultation will be on everything contained within the report and will run until the 10th of February. The reason it's such a short consultation is because we didn't have the settlement until just before Christmas from the Welsh Government. In terms of the consultation process, we've already done a significant amount of pre-consultation engagement with the public, with members, with staff, with managers, which has fed into these proposals. And over the next few weeks, we will be consulting specifically with town and community councils. We have 2 sessions with the voluntary sector, and we have 8 staff briefing sessions, a session with accountable managers, and obviously we'll be putting physical copies of the consultation questionnaire in libraries. Everything will be online, promoted via our social media channels, and we'll be looking for members and the public to engage as much as possible in the consultation process. So I think, Chair, that's all I wanted to say on the report this afternoon. And obviously, I'm happy to take any questions members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. Very, very clear. Thank you very much. Thank you for all your hard work. I know that members do have questions for the officers. I have some people already pre-arranged here. I'll call on Councillor Rob Jones first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the update, Hugh. Spoiled some of my questions by what you've alluded to, so bear with me. Chair, I've got some observations in relation to the documentation that we've got and some questions intertwined within those observations. As a Labour group, we've been setting the budgets in this council since the council was incepted, and since 2008 we've had austerity where we've lost £100 million out of our budget over that period of time. But we as a group always saw it as a whole council problem, with not everyone having that vision. But I think that's changed now. The Coalition Council is already receiving criticism, heavy criticism on social media in relation to the document that's been publicly released as of last Friday, particularly concerning the council tax rise of 4.5%, which is highlighted on page 9 of the report. And to indicate that's the highest council tax rise in the last 5 years under the previous administration that will take place, either should it be altered or stand. But key to this is the reserves that have been built up over many years, which has become a key part of the budget, which without would even set that council tax higher, as you have already alluded to here in your introduction. £4.9 million in total going through the reserves, and as you were indicating, going forward, you know, we could be in worse trouble, which is why we said we needed the projection over the 5-year period life of the council. setting the budget is one thing, accepting responsibility for it is another, and blaming either internal or external factors to create a balanced budget does not go down well with the public. That's all they will see at this moment in time is an increase in council tax for whatever reason. So moving to the items of the Let's Talk campaign, which is heavily emphasised within the consultation process, which is listed under paragraph 3. 67 members of the public actually attended across the venues, whichever way you look at it, is a poor response to the public to turn out to these meetings. You know, councillors outnumbered them, and members of the press and the NPT CVS outnumbered them. But I think what's important here, which is not highlighted in the report, is what is going to be the baseline of measurement in relation to community engagement with this budget. So very well to produce figures going forward of how many people attended, but it's the level of engagement that those in attendance actually produce. So it's silent in relation to how we're going to measure the success of the Let's Talk campaign going forward with the consultation, the documentation, the questionnaire that's being produced. There is a very detailed action plan, but there's no dates and there's no responsibilities within that action plan. As in Appendix 1 under paragraph 9, it's not populated. So we've got an action plan without considerable amount of detail that's required. Moving on to page 12 of the report under paragraph 3, where it talks about indoor leisure, it actually says a number of options for addressing this and the position are being developed as part of the budget's setting process, but there's no options listed within the indoor leisure provision. So again, for clarity, what further options are being considered that should be included in part of the consultation process, because they're not included there. £48 million funding gap over 5 years is a considerable amount. We didn't face that when we were in office. But again, I come to Appendix 1 of the main report, and on page 19, you're settling pay at 4% this year and decreasing to 3%. When all the unions are asking for anything between 10 and 13% going forward. And with the cost of living crisis that's currently undertaken, that's why we've got so many different areas of public service striking, because they're not getting a fair deal. And Steve Phillips always used to say, well, we pay you the rise, but how many staff are we going to lose in relation to that? So that's something that desperately needs to be addressed. And I think we're undervaluing that 3% going forward in relation to pay settlements for the next 5 years. Likewise, the Fire Authority, and you've already alluded to this, who going forward, you've got it balanced at 5%, when they indicated for next year and have settled on a 13%, they were looking at between 8 and 13%, and their costs are going to continue to rise, not go down. And I think, again, 5% is an unrealistic target on a future prediction in relation to this funding gap. You were asked in the seminar about the £2.8 million, and in the documentation, it actually calls it as a renewable energy transition fund. But at that point, there was ambiguity in relation to, is this purely renewable energies or is it energy efficient? And again, that is not clarified in the report. And it says it's all services and includes schools. Well, all services are all services. So how much weight is being given to schools in relation to its involvement in this process? Page 22, with this, Councillor Percy actually questioned this with the renewable or energy efficient, but to date it hasn't been answered. So I think for the purposes of openness and clarity for people to be consulted on this, then they should in fact know what that specific monies is going to be used for. And then likewise, you touched on the specific grant equalisation of £1 million. Well, there are so many specific grants. Is this just a catch-all for any grants that we highlighted under the fair funding meeting that we had last week? Or are you targeting particular things like the waste grant that was cut halfway through the year, So again, there's no detail there on what that equalisation fund is for. We are disappointed to see there's no codes this year attached to any of the suggestions coming forward. This is either to give us an idea of tracking past recommendations that are being carried forward in this financial year, or to monitor new ideas that have come forward. So as in the past, when you'd have health, housing and social services, you'd have that code HHSS and environment ENV. It's very difficult then to track the different budget lines. And we would ask, and not for the consultation, but certainly ask that we get the coding so they can be better monitored going forward and make it more clear for members to follow. Another area that's giving cause for concern in that report is the fuel inflation on page 24. Line 5 says there's a high risk to the waste service delivery. There is no explanation as what mitigation has been taking place in relation to that high risk and how it's being dealt with going forward, because in essence, that will mean a change to the service delivery of waste, which in the documentation says there'll be no changes to service delivery. Another area of concern under page 29, it says schools under the education budget services of savings is to fund cleaning services. Well, with the way that school budgets are currently, it's just a question of how are they expected to do that when they've already got to pick up the difference between the 4% that we've awarded under the pay award and the 5% that the government have agreed under the independent remuneration panel. And although teachers are now starting to go on strike for a lot higher than that, that is going to impact on school budgets, and they're not going to be able to afford to clean schools. And I know there's different differentiation between secondaries and primaries there, with secondaries employing their own and the primaries actually self-centre contracted. The bottom line here in relation is that the consultation document, which we had to ask for, and the questionnaire, which we had to ask for, were not included in the original papers, and we've literally had 24 hours or less in which to study the documentation. We are going to be looked to make a recommendation for it to go out to the public today. It's not acceptable to get documentation this late, and for whatever reason, if this documentation was going out, it should have been prepared with the papers that came out last Friday. The thing is here, with all budget setting, and I'll finish on this, Chair, there is no golden pot at the end of this particular rainbow. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Who would you like to respond, please?
Yes, sure, of course I will. So if I try and take each question, I suppose I won't make any comments on your observations, Councillor Jones, but in terms of the questions, renewable transition fund at the moment is just a amount of money that we are setting aside in these proposals. We recognise the fact that over the next 7 years, we have to move to a net zero approach. So putting £2.8 million in the base budget to help that, we think is the right thing to do. There is no further detail at the moment because obviously these are just drafts for consultation. But when we come in, if the consultation and the budget is approved as it is, when we get to next year, any use of that fund will be reported and agreed by members in advance. So you will have full transparency as to what that £2.8 million is being used for. So that's the first one. Specific grants, yes, it's a catch-all. We are doing some detailed work around what the All Wales position means, but we don't have any allocations for actual amounts for the council at the moment. So you will be aware, obviously, you will have seen the fact that, as I mentioned, some are capped at this year's level on an All Wales basis. That obviously means a real terms cut because of pay and inflation, etc. It means we deliver less for the grant. Some are to be confirmed. As you mentioned, the waste grant is still to be confirmed, and that underpins some of our waste delivery services. So we are setting aside or proposing to set aside £1 million in the base budget to mitigate against the effect of any of those cuts to specific grants, but we don't know what they are yet. I take your point on board around future years' pay awards. As you said, at the moment, the industrial situation is ongoing. We are building in 6% for next year, which is probably more than most councils in Wales are actually doing, recognising the fact that this year's pay award was in between 10% and 1%, but an average of 6%. But future years, they are our best collective estimates as a corporate directors group at the moment as to where we think those inflation factors are going to go. In terms of schools, whilst it's not explicit in the actual proposal, if these were all agreed, it would actually mean an 8.6% increase in new funding for schools, because we are we are making good the fact that the Welsh Government haven't funded the actual pay awards for this year in what we're proposing going forward, and we're fully funding all pay awards based on the 5%, as you rightly said. Some teaching unions are striking around that. Cleaning services, the proposal is, yes, you're quite correct, that we charge the whole cost of the school cleaning services to schools, which we think is the right thing to do. We don't think that the council should be subsidising cleaning in schools. I take a point around no codes on the budget solution, so we will make sure that we actually identify each individual one with a separate code when we come back, if these are the final proposals that come back in March. I think fuel inflation, I wasn't quite sure what page you were referring to there, Councillor Jones, if you want to remind me, sorry.
I've got it listed as page 24, line 5. It says fuel inflation. It warns of a high risk to service delivery on waste.
Or increase to contract price over rate of fuel increase, yes.
Well, it's above that one.
Yeah, at the time we actually put these proposals together, obviously fuel was around, diesel 180, 190 a litre. Obviously that's come down significantly now, so hopefully that risk will be not high risk. So as I mentioned, there are no proposals at the moment to change anything around waste service delivery.
Thank you, Hugh. Councillor Jones, would you like to come back, please?
Yeah, just very briefly. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you for the answers. If that is the case, can the risk register, which shows it as a high risk, now be then changed to a medium to low or a medium risk, which I think is prudent based on the answer that you've given? And one point I'd like to come back on is the school salary. In the seminars, you actually said that the 4% that we've been budgeting for teachers' pay against the 1% difference with the Welsh Government's settlement was going to be originally funded by schools for this year out of reserves. Does that still remain the situation, or are we now fully funding the delegated schools budget at 5%?
For this financial year, that gap will need to be funded from school reserves because we haven't been given any additional funding from the Welsh Government. But for next year, we are then putting that, making good in the school's budget going forward at 5%.
So I need to be clear, if schools fall into a deficit budget, there is a promise from this authority that that deficit will be made up the following year, and therefore any deficit could be used in a mitigation when they go to try and put a plan in over a 2-year period to balance their books.
I'm not saying the deficit will be made good. What I'm saying is that we will be putting permanent funding within the base budget next year for this year's pay awards. They will have the effect of 1 year's gap to fund in this year, but that's not going to be an ongoing issue. It'll be in the base budget going forward for them. So I think that helps. Just in terms, sorry, I didn't touch on your question on the consultation. From my memory, we have never included a copy of the consultation questionnaire in the draft budget proposals, and that was provided yesterday at the request of scrutiny members. So I don't think it's an omission based on what we've done in previous years, Councillor Jones.
No, it was the consultation document, not so much the questionnaire. It was the whole package, because we are scrutinising what we're going out to consult on.
Right.
And we didn't get that until yesterday. That's what I'm saying.
The consultation document is the actual whole report. We are consulting with the public on the report in its entirety. So I'm sorry if there's some confusion there. We'll try and clarify that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Jones? Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to our next observations and questions, please. Councillor Sonia Reynolds, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted, and I'll go back in on the issue of the consultation document. You can clarify, therefore, because we didn't, when I asked for the consultation document, what I got was the action plan and the proposals for how we were going to consult, which I also asked for, but I also didn't get the questionnaire, which then came when I came in this morning. We discussed that. So it's exactly, that what I was looking for is what are we consulting on? And you're actually confirming, as I understand it, that it will just be this paper with a slightly different heading.
Who?
We're consulting on the whole 53-page report that's in front of the Cabinet today.
Right.
So I'll hand over to maybe Karen and Anita, who will be better placed to provide details as to how we're going to make sure the public are engaged in that process. But the consultation document is everything.
Thank you. That's just clarified that. The action plan indicates further public meetings, which weren't mentioned when you gave your brief overview as to what was going to be happening. There's going to be a cost for that. Is that within existing budget provision? Where's that coming from? And is it worth it, given the amount of response we got for the last set of meetings?
Thanks, Sonia. Who? Or Karen? Sorry.
Thank you, Sonia. Councillor Reynolds. Within existing budgets, we haven't set ourselves a target in terms of the response rate. So measuring the success will be dependent on the response rate. But what we will do will be maximising the promotion of the consultation as much as we can to ensure we get the best response.
Thank you. And if I can move on to page 12, looking at the Celtic energy discussion, two questions around that. One is, there was going to be a business plan. To my mind, I've still not seen that. So I'm not sure where the details of the costs and the Celtic Leisure, sorry. I live too close to East Pitt. It comes to mind every time I say Celtic. So yes, Celtic Leisure business plan. And consequently, it's really difficult to say, whether this 1.4 is enough, whether we're looking at more, whether there's, and to have a feel around that. And I wondered whether the business plan was due to come out anytime soon. And the second question on that is, which part of specific reserves is that 1.4 coming from?
Thanks, Councillor Reynolds. Can we bring in Mr. Andrew Thomas, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the business plan, we do have the business plan for the cost of running indoor leisure next year and on. So yeah, that certainly can be provided to members. No issue at all, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Just in terms of the second question, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
The 1.4 million is proposed to come from the corporate contingency specific reserve, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Reynolds, is that okay?
Corporate contingency.
Okay.
And right, sorry, no, I've finished my list of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Moving along, next person with a question is Councillor Carol Clement Williams, please. Carol.
In the pre-scrutiny, Chair, I did say that I would wait to see what responses my other colleagues had, and I believe that there are other colleagues that still have questions.
Okay, Councillor. Councillor Suzanne Patterson, then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in the beginning, you've listed, or it is proposed to list several reasons why we're in the state we are in. I think it's remiss not to put in there the national Tory government, because yes, Brexit, yes, all of the things that are listed there, but quite recently, the Westminster government have piled on an awful lot more into the cost of living for everybody, and therefore councils as well. We are the same, we're at the mercy of the current situation, and I don't know whether you might consider just putting that in as well as a reason. I mean, I do take on board that they are relevant reasons, but if you would do that, that would be great. Excuse me, I'm just scrolling through to my highlights. Oh, beg your pardon. Right, okay, yes. Hugh, you've gone into mentioning that you've just put 2.8 million in for that energy. Sorry, I'm losing my words here. How did you arrive at that figure?
Who?
Yeah, so we have included an inflation provision of 50% for energy, which is £2.8 million. So we've then included basically another 50% or another £2.8 million into this transitional energy budget. So that's where the
and what is the transitional budget? What's it there for?
Well, it's there if agreed by members in March to help support council services move to a more renewable energy type approach. So obviously, as I mentioned, we have until 2030 to achieve the net zero target. I think my colleague Nicola is going to kindly come in and offer some more words on that as well. Thank you.
Okay. Nicola?
Thank you, Chair. We've got that £2 million fund. If you were to ask me, is it enough? I would say, no, it's not. But obviously, that's all that we've got available at the moment to afford our transition. We need by 2030 to operate this council in a net zero capacity. So we need to transition our fleet. That's not just pool cars, that's our waste freighters, the vehicles that go out and fix our roads. We need to transition our buildings. And we need to change the behaviour of our staff and our councillors in terms of the way we operate. So there's quite a lot of preparation work required in order to do that. So we need to do a lot of feasibility work to find out which options are going to be the best options to pursue with the funding that we've got available. So we've got to do that upfront work. And hopefully when we have a plan in place in terms of the buildings that we're going to retain and improve, the vehicles that we're going to retain and continue to operate, and what fuel they're going to use. Are they going to be hydrogen? Are they going to be electric? Do we have the infrastructure to charge those vehicles going forward? Once we've had that feasibility work done, we can use any remaining funding to deliver that, but we will be reliant upon capital funding from Welsh Government and other funding streams. So the money there is not enough, but it's the amount that we have got available to deliver that long-term plan by 2030.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Watson?
And do we know, it says including schools, do we know where the demarcation line is on that amount for the rest of it and then schools?
No, we've got this fund, and as I say, we will be doing a lot of feasibility work.
So it's all general.
So we don't want to, for example, expend a significant sum of money in buildings or vehicles or assets that we have, which may not necessarily provide the reduced carbon footprint that we need to achieve. So we're going to be looking at it across the board, and we will be setting up a project team to identify what options we have available that we can afford to actually pursue, because these are going to be very, very costly transitions, which every time we have meetings with Welsh Government, we are making that point to them that we will have to use this funding wisely, but there isn't 20% for the schools and 80% for elsewhere, or vice versa. It is a pot that we'll have to bid into to ensure that we can deliver that transition as smoothly as possible.
Thank you. If I could just carry on, because I've got a couple of questions. It does seem prudent to inform the public. If you're going to the public for consultation and spending, it's quite a lot of money, 2.8 million, for them to sort of know what it was basically, you know, a brief description, because just having a line on a budget report, a lot of people wouldn't understand the need. The fact that Welsh Government have told us we've got to, you know, be carbon neutral by such and such time. I just thought a little bit of detail to the public might get a better response. So I just wanted to comment on that. Also, on page 27, you've got a line of savings of 293,000 for buildings to be vacated. Again, I think members of the public might be a little lost as to how you can save £293,000 by vacating a building. Now, is it that we will be heating it less? Is it that we are going to be selling properties and then getting more money in? I think the detail there for the public might have been welcome, especially for councillors as well. So I'll leave that one. I'll move on to the next one. Then on page 29, you've got a savings there of overall in the next 5 years, 556,000 for Margam Park, and 100,000 for the budget that we're talking about. Again, how is that to be achieved? I know we've got scrutiny committees coming up, but when we are asking or being asked today to sort of send a message to the public that we want, as a council and the coalition in particular, want to do these particular lines on the budget, there's no sort of explanation as to how that would come about. Similarly, 167,000, I know it's been mentioned for school cleaning. The budget can say, right, we think schools should foot the bill for this. But how are they going to foot the bill for this? And if they don't, if they're in a deficit position already with their staffing and equipment for schools, how are they going to find another 167,000 to clean the schools? And what will happen when the members of the public have children coming home saying, our schools are in a right mess, you know? Are they going to understand what it actually means to say we're going to save 167 on cleaning? Knoll Country Park, 85,000 over the period, 30,000 next year. Do we know, again, where you're going to get 30,000 from? And the leisure services, you've got 600,000 saving over the years, 250 for the year we're talking about. Is that included in the 1.4 million? Or is that extra? And again, how are we going to save money on leisure services to the tune of 250,000? Nearly done. Digital savings, I can understand that. There we are. Page 31. The vacancy management target, it seems very high. As I say, I will be asking questions when we get to scrutiny. But I'm mentioning these things now as a member of the public. You know, I get this report, this whole 53, 54 pages. I read it and I'm asked to comment on it. I don't think an awful, well, I'm a councillor and I'm asking the questions, how is this going to happen? I don't think an awful lot, and I'm not trying to demean any member of the public. You may have accountants out there who would be able to do it, you know, no problem. But I think a little bit more detail, if we're being asked to say, yes, we will send this report to the public for their ideas on it, I just think it's a little bit too brief to send to the public. So those are my comments on it. I can understand that officers may possibly know exactly where they're going to find this money. But when you go to consultation, surely you should give the public a little bit more. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Patterson. Just going through the list. Could I bring Nicola in on the point about the Knoll Park savings, please?
Thank you, Chair. There was quite a few questions there, and obviously you've gone through the tables in terms of the savings. Well, in terms of the Knoll, which is obviously within my directorate, I'm pleased to announce, and you may have seen it in the media already, that we secured confirmation just before midnight last night that we had achieved a successful outcome in terms of our LUF bid. So it's just shy of £18 million that we've secured funding from the UK government, and the Knoll featured very prominently within that left bid. So we will be investing in the Knoll to improve the experience to visitors, improve the car parking arrangements, the renewable energy infrastructure, the cafe visitor centre, and so on, as part of that wider Neath Valley heritage corridor. So notwithstanding that, it was our intention to undertake improvements to the facility anyway, to enable the subsidy that the council provides to the operation of that facility to be removed. So the investment that we're making will enable that facility to actually make a profit, whereas in previous years we've been making a loss and we've had to subsidise it. So that's the specifics in relation to the Knoll, but all the other sort of leisure facilities that are included in the table will also be doing similar, delivering similar opportunities. So we need to ensure that the visitor attraction actually operates on a cost recovery basis, because we cannot afford to subsidise our facilities in the longer run anymore, because we have so many budget pressures generally within the council. So those savings really are a target for us to try and drive down those subsidies so they operate on a cost recovery basis, albeit I've given you a little bit more detail on Knoll because it's so hot off the press. It's fantastic news.
Just to make officers aware, there is no sound coming through on the Teams call. Thank you.
Was that something I did? Or?
Tam, just to check, can you hear me talking now?
Yes, and just to confirm, I can hear Councillor Paterson now. Thank you.
I hadn't pressed the green button. I do apologise. Hang my head in shame. Yes, I know. And then my very last comment, and I'll leave it there, Chair, is that yes, if we're going to take money from reserves, it is absolutely imperative that we cut the costs of things. And I can't, from this report, see where we're going to put the 4.1 or whatever 4.6 back, and also find money for next year's running costs for the revenue, because we've always been taught if you take money out of reserves, you're going to almost find double the next year. And bearing in mind that the forecast from Welsh Government going forward is going to be less, I'm wondering how we can possibly rely on being able to put that money back. And I will call it a day then.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Can I bring Mr Andrew Thomas back in on some of those points raised by Councillor Patterson, please?
Certainly, Chair. I was wondering what was happening. There was a big, long, pregnant pause. I thought, are you all waiting for me to speak? I'll try and take them, Suzanne, in the order that you sort of went through them. First of all, school cleaning. You mentioned we can't afford to subsidise school cleaning any longer. This is something we've been looking at for a number of years, and there have been some increased charges to schools for the cleaning service. I think we need to, whilst I don't want to see any increased costs to schools, we do need to set this against the overall settlement for schools. I think it's an 8.6% increase for school budgets, so £164,000. Whilst in a perfect world I wouldn't want to see any increased costs for them, that £164,000 will be spread across around 55 schools, so it's not a massive increase per school. That said, Councillor Patterson mentioned some schools are in deficit, and those schools in deficit who struggle to make those recharges will have a small number of choices, really. One of them is to, if they wish to continue with the service from the council, they'll have to prioritise that within their budgets, and other things would have to be cut. Or they would try to look for a service outside of the council, which they may find to be more cheaper. Basically, I doubt whether it's more cost effective, but it might be cheaper. might be an inferior service, but those really are their choices. Just in terms of the Margam Park ambition, Nicola just said that it's a target that we're trying to achieve full cost recovery over a 3-year period. There's a couple of things which are sort of, again, this needs to be set against. One of them is the emerging cultural strategy, which we should have before members in April or certainly early May at the latest. And the new head of service for leisure starts with us on the 20th of February. He comes with a commercial pedigree, reputation. So we're going to see what ideas he has. There's a range of things which we can do to try and reduce the subsidy at Margam Park, albeit I have to say it's going to be extremely challenging. We've got an income generation target, which if it manifests itself, will help. And certainly the cultural strategy. I had a meeting yesterday just with the HLF around a significant investment bid for Margam Castle yesterday. There's obviously no guarantee, no certainty around that, but if that does come to fruition over a longer period of time, that will certainly help the bottom line in terms of the costs at Margam. But I would be the first to say that those targets are extremely challenging. And in terms of the leisure services, the £250,000, I believe that is a much more realistic and achievable target, because of course that's a combination of increased income and reduced costs. And if we were to drive £250,000 of the costs out of leisure services on top of the costs that we're currently predicting next year, it still would be nowhere near the cost of the service pre-pandemic. So there's hopefully the industry will recover and continue to recover as it is currently. Albeit it is very, very slow, and the economic climate we're working in at the moment means that the recovery from the pandemic in terms of leisure provision is much slower than one would hope. But I do believe that the £250,000 through a combination of energy efficiency, Nicola spoke about that earlier, quite clearly leisure buildings are significant consumers of energy, and if we can get some investment to drive down those costs, well, that will certainly help. Investment in things like health and fitness, where there's a return, a renewed focus on membership, recruitment and retention, and I say that emphasis on the return to pre-pandemic performance. So I think the £250,000 in terms of indoor leisure is a far more realistic and achievable target than some perhaps the Margam Park one. Nevertheless, it is something that we need to strive for and have an ambition towards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Patterson, would you like to come back on something?
I'm grateful for your forbearance here with me. It just seems that going forward, although that we're not going to be charging extra, we may be charging extra. It may be that residents at the end of the day have to pay more for these services or these attractions that we as a council are going to be running. And I just think that adds to the cost of living for all our residents. It's not really something you would like to do. I understand that. But I think, again, when we go into consultation, it should be clear to the public what these savings may mean for them, paying more for this, that or the other. And, I'm saying this, that or the other because it's not really in the report. It's what we might be able to achieve with our ongoing energy cost savings and all this. I'm just saying they should be aware that this may be possible, but it might not be possible. And I don't think that's quite clear in it either. So I'm going to finish there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Hugh, can I bring you back in to respond to that, please?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Just in terms of a couple of the observations made around the lack of detail, there's obviously an opportunity during the consultation process for us to provide more detail. So that's something I'll take on board, and we will look to do that soon, well, immediately as part of this process. Just in terms of reserves, to answer that point, Councillor Patterson, you were quite right, and you'll have heard me say and my predecessor say, once they're gone, they're gone. What we don't know at the moment is whether some of the demand for our services, especially in the social services area, is an ongoing structural demand, or whether things are, as I mentioned in the seminar, a bulge as a result of us coming out of the pandemic. So we're using reserves in the first place in a sensible way, keeping above the 4% target, to then help us do some more work around whether that demand is there forever. And we will be starting work on the medium-term financial plan in far more detail to try and close that £48 million gap as soon as this budget process is over. So my colleagues will have no let up. I'm afraid it's straight into it after this to make sure that we can make sure that we make good that use of reserves going forward. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Hugh. Councillor Patson. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for all your observations, sir. Could I bring in Councillor Rebecca Phillips, please? Rebecca Phillips there? I know she was attending a funeral, so I'm not sure whether she's made it back. It doesn't appear so. We'll move on then, please, to Councillor Sean Percy.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. I'm afraid bring us back to this 2.8 million figure for renewable energy transition, because I'm probably more perhaps confused now than I was in the seminar, if I'm honest. Obviously, bearing in mind this is a revenue piece of funding, I'm still struggling to see how we would spend 2.8 million in the financial year on that, given that the explanation so far was around carrying out feasibility work. So I don't know whether Nicola or another director could perhaps explain in a bit more detail. But given this is going to be in the budget as as I understand it, permanently for the foreseeable future as a £2.8 million fund, are we employing staff? I don't quite understand where that money is being spent. So I really appreciate a bit more explanation on that one. And I also want to come back to the point around the schools and teachers' pay, which is something that I'd raised previously in this committee when we had the report a few meetings ago. And I still would like that reassurance from officers that the analysis has been done to identify which schools may struggle to meet that cost this year. So I would still appreciate that information to come back to the committee, just so we've got some reassurance. And likewise, if with this clean-in proposal, I appreciate it's a more modest amount of money than the teachers' pay. But if there is some analysis and some particular schools identified, or at least a number, it just may give us a bit of reassurance, or at least an understanding of what the impact of some of these decisions might be. And also, again, apologies Hugh, but a general point around the kind of format of the report that's been brought to us. I know a few colleagues have mentioned this already, so I completely agree with the need to have the reference numbers against the proposals. That's something that's been standard practice since I've been a member, and I was quite surprised that they weren't present on the report today to go out to consultation. But also there's a little bit of confusion or ambiguity as to what are the proposals. Are they the items contained within the table, or are they items mentioned within the narrative and the paragraphs? Because there are some items mentioned in the narrative that are not included in tables, don't have amounts against them. And it's not clear to me if they are thoughts that did not make it into a final table, or whether they are also being considered. And that was much clearer in previous years' reports, because we had a definitive table of items included. So I appreciate if I could have some answers to those questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Percy.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Percy. So the £2.8 million, to answer your question, we are not 100% clear ourselves exactly what we're going to use it for, because these are draft proposals for consultation. If members are minded to agree these proposals when we get to March, then we will set a criteria for how the fund can be accessed. And as I said earlier, there'll be visibility for members in terms of what the fund is being used to fund. In terms of teachers' pay, the analysis has been done, and I'll speak to Andrew Thomas and see what we can get out to you in terms of that. And I take your point in terms of the format of the report. If members are not clear, then I apologise for that. I will make sure that there are references in future, but just for clarity, the only budget solutions being proposed for next year are the ones that are detailed in Appendix 3, totaling £15 million. There may be words in the narrative around work that's going to be progressed as part of the medium-term financial plan, but the budget solutions are the ones detailed in those tables, and they will come back with relevant references for the final report in March. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Hugh. Sean, are we happy with that, Councillor Percy?
Yeah, appreciate the clarity. Thank you, Hugh.
Chair. Chair,
Andrew,
can
Andrew Thomas?
Yeah, could I just sort of add a little bit to, because Councillor Percy talked about the impact as well as the sort of the, if you like, the sort of the numerical bit. The numerical bit is quite easy to calculate in terms of how each school will, particularly in terms of school pay, because I suppose that's the big one. Quite clearly, pre-pandemic, we had probably about a dozen schools that were in a deficit position, and so any increased costs on those, the impact of that is going to be felt far greater than, because it just means the deficit they're in is deeper. Now that number did reduce because of COVID and all the grants that came in from Welsh Government as a result, so that number has reduced. But I think the impact of it, and I just, one of the reasons I'm on the council chamber this afternoon, I'm rushing back from NASH, which is the group of head teachers in secondary schools. One of the head teachers there of the secondary school said that the difference in the 4% pay that we put into the budgets compared to the actual costs as they currently are, notwithstanding any industrial action which we're about potentially to face, is about £140,000. Now, the school has reserves to be able to, if you like, accommodate that increased cost, which is unfunded. But the real impact is it needs to be described in terms of recovery post-COVID. So there's £140,000 worth of reduced funding, which is not available to spend on pupils' recovery in schools. And of course, in our secondary schools, that's a fairly typical size school, to be honest, Councillor Percy. Obviously, in primary schools, the number would be lower, but the impact probably the same, because it's all relative. So I think, it's quite easy to look at these things on a spreadsheet and tell you it's 50 grand, but I think, the actual impact isn't 50 grand. It's what doesn't happen as a result of not having that 50 grand. So just thought I'd add that in terms of sort of context.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Percy, are we happy with the responses, please?
Yes, happy. Thanks, Andrew, for the extra information there.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. If I could now bring in Councillor Clement Williams, please. Carol Williams. Carol?
Thanks, Chair. I've got a question. I've got a couple of things I wanted to bring up, but first of all, I wanted to ask a question about the 10% increase in the fees, charges, etc. Is that a flat 10% rate across all of them, or is there going to be more in some than others? E.g., would that mean 10% on car parking, 10% on any other fee you charge that we work as a flat rate?
Who? We've assumed a 10% increase in fees and charges for those where we can actually set those ourselves. However, it doesn't necessarily mean the charge will go up by 10%, because the actual increase could be through volume as opposed to price. So we've assumed in that people's fees and charges budget where we can will increase by 10%. But as I say, it doesn't mean necessarily every single fee and charge will go up by 10%.
Thank you. Thanks, Hugh. Thanks, Chair. So for me, it's very ambiguous, this budget. When we've done budgets in the past, there's normally line by line. We'll argue about 10,000 for the workings in the mine, or we argue about 70,000 over closing libraries, and it's line by line, and we normally have it around July to October at the latest. There's very big figures in here with no breakdowns. It's very ambiguous for me. There's an awful lot of risks in here When I've actually put boxes around some of these tables. Although a lot of them are low risk, it's got based on post-COVID practices. It's very ambiguous. There's one with the Lonlas in a potential insufficient storage facility. So does that mean there's no work being done on that? Do we know or don't we know? Low risk. There's page 29. Risk of subsidy can't not be removed, a lot in there, and there's 2 other low risks. The recovery costs for the cleaning services is in there as a low risk schools to fund. What if a school hasn't got reserves, and what if they can't meet the fee without? So basically what I'm saying is if they can't do that, then it's a cut, it's a general cut to the school's budget. And on page, I've covered it with a line now, I think it's 31. There's only 2 in there where it actually says there's no risk. So when we're supposed to come out at the end of the March and set a balanced budget, there's an awful lot of unknowns and risks in you. And there's a lot of an ambiguity, sorry. Buildings, for example, do we have buyers for this £293,000? If not, where's the £293? I could go on and on. I'm just pointing out to you that there's very little detail in here for me, to be quite honest with you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Carol. Hugh?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So obviously lots of observations there from Councillor Clement Williams, which I'll take on board. In terms of school cleaning, Andrew's already answered that question, I think. And again, in terms of Lonlas, which is 2 years down the line, and a risk that we can't store things, well, work will be ongoing in terms of how we deliver that removal of subsidy over the next couple of years. So thank you, Chair, and I'll take all those observations on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you. As I say, though, there's if we do, or there's a lot of time before then. Will we do it? It's still very ambiguous for me. But thank you, and thank you, Hugh.
Thank you, Carol. Next up, I have Councillor Chris James, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick couple of questions about some of the identified efficiency savings. But first, I'd like to congratulate the officers on identifying these savings. Short space of time, it was really well done by the officers, and I'd like to thank them for their work. First one, I know Councillor Patterson mentioned it, the vacancy factor that we've looked at. See, that's based on a 95% of vacancies being filled, or jobs being filled at any one time. Is this a realistic estimate, or is it even maybe a conservative estimate? I just like to base it, where are we at the moment, roughly, with the percentage of vacancies or units filled? So that's one question. The second question then is more about the building reviews we've done. Well done so far, but I know there's a larger review of buildings and council working patterns going on at the moment. I'm just wondering, is that going to come into play this financial year? Will that be more future saving going forward?
Thank you, Chris. Who would you like to check that?
Yeah, I take the vacancy factor question first. So what we are assuming with the 5% vacancy factor is that during the financial year, there will be natural turnover in terms of council staff. It will take time to replace. We will naturally have a period of time where posts are vacant. Members will have heard previously that at certain points during the last year, we've had over 300 vacancies across the council. So we are expecting that the 5% factor across the whole council, and excluding schools, because we haven't put a vacancy factor on schools, will be achievable at £2.9 million. What you find is when people leave, they leave at the top of what they call a spinal column point range. Excuse me. They start at the bottom, so there are naturally occurring savings there. So we are confident that vacancy factor across the whole council can be achieved over the financial year. Now, what will inevitably happen is when we start doing budget monitoring reports at the start of the year, we will be making some assumptions around that, but we will be monitoring that on a monthly basis and reporting it back to the Cabinet every quarter as part of the process. So that's my response on that one. And Nicola will pick up the accommodation and question. Councillor James.
Thank you, Nicola.
Right, thank you. We've got a plan in place that we are currently pursuing, whereby we're looking at the usage of our buildings, whether we own them, whether we lease them, and the costs associated with maintaining those buildings. So we've got phase 1 in place already, and in that phase we've got a number of buildings highlighted which we can vacate, and we can secure savings in terms of utility costs, so energy, water rates, etc. If we own those properties, we're looking to sell them on or potentially lease them to other people. We are occupying buildings which we lease from other organisations, other landlords. So when we withdraw from those buildings, obviously we're saving the rental, the rent that we're paying those landlords. So there's a saving there. But we want to do it in a planned way because obviously we need to maintain sufficient accommodation to enable the council to continue to operate, and it needs to be in the right place, and it also needs to be of a sufficient quality to enable us to transition to net zero in those buildings as well. So there's phase 1 in relation to a number of buildings. Phase 2, we're going to be looking at the civic centres that we currently occupy. You know, can we operate within them in a different way to the way we are at the moment? You know, do we need to open them 5 days a week? Can we reduce the operating hours? Can we introduce other occupiers into those buildings to enable us to cover the costs of running them in a much more efficient way? So there's a number of different sort of avenues that we're pursuing in relation to the accommodation that we currently own.
Again, Nicola. Chris, you okay?
Yeah.
No, lovely, thank you. Just checking now, Councillor Matthew Crowley, please. You had your hand up earlier. Do you still want to come in?
Yes, please, Chair. I thought he was ignoring me, but thank you for that. Just to say, I've heard little today in the way of any suggestions. I know the consultation process hasn't started today, but till tomorrow or whatever. But 2 factors for me: could officers and members refrain from using acronyms, because these are public meetings that will go out to the public, and God forbid they won't know what some of the acronyms are. I'm sure that members and officers don't know them all themselves. In education, there's probably about 300 different acronyms. So if we could bear that in mind in future, please, that would be responsive for the general public purposes. Coming back to, I'll give one suggestion here today, because I haven't heard any today as yet in terms of consultation about raising revenue. I will pay tribute to I know Sonia will like this one. I was written to this week by the Amaltawi up in the Cwmgors area, whereby we had to close the school under the SIP project. That wasn't comfortable for all members at that time. And of course, we got similar proposals going forward in the future. But it's real testament to what the community did up there. They had that old Cwmgors school. They managed to raise money through wind farm projects and regeneration projects and God knows what. And they've turned that into a community hub. They've refurbished it completely. I'm hoping to get up there when the weather breaks to have a little look around myself. I'm very familiar with the building. But going forward, there are a couple of things. When we look into discharge of buildings, there's a distinct lack of small business enterprise startup buildings within the county borough. I've said this for years and years and years. We need to start developing some sort of little small business units. Now, a old school could be an opportunity to do that, rather than selling it on and let some land grabber come in and do whatever they want to do with it. So there are ways we can go. I know it's an expense to it, but it's certainly a regeneration project. And Nicola will know, and especially Dave Phillips in the States, I've been banging on about this for years and years and years, because people are not able to start their businesses because they haven't got the facility or small units. That's one easy project that we could do. Capital investment to start, but longevity in terms of income coming in as a result going forward. And of course, if we can build them in the factor of looking at ecology and the way the eco-climate is going, it'll be a carbon neutral policy tick win as well. So just 2 little factors, 2 little observations, Chair, and I thank you for the indulgence. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Crowley. Nicola, would you like to add anything to that, please?
Yeah, no problem at all. Item 6, which is on the agenda today, talks about the Shared Prosperity Fund, and there are 5 anchor projects on there, and one of them is relating. Sorry, one of them is about places. And under that place bid, we are proposing to build new industrial units within our valley communities, because we acknowledge there is a huge demand from small businesses for appropriate floor space within our valleys. We haven't been able to secure funding in the past from various funding sources, because they're primarily aimed at town centres and the peripheries of town centres. But under the SPF, we have had the opportunity to put forward projects to invest in the valley communities. So as part of that particular project, there's £6.3 million set aside, or proposed to be set aside, to deliver a number of things. And we can obviously go on to the detail of that when we get to item 6. But we do acknowledge that there is a huge demand out there for appropriate floor space. You know, it's fair to say that since the demise of the WDA, we haven't been building industrial units. So we as an authority have got to look at our investment ambitions. You know, we've recently refurbished the metal box building within Neath, and that is proven to be hugely successful. And businesses are, approaching the authority, looking for floor space within that building. Now we need to sort of, learn from that and see if we can replicate it in other buildings that we consider to be surplus to our requirements. So we need to be repurposing our buildings and taking the opportunity also to build new ones, so that we can kickstart the economy in those areas.
Thank you, Nicola.
If I could go
Good
back,
news.
Chair.
Matthew, are you happy with that?
If I could just come back, just a small point.
Okay.
You use the acronym again, Nicola, SFP. I'm disappointed with that. I'll just not telling you about that. The reality is, as well, as you know, there are private investors out there who would build. There's a parcel of land, I don't want to get parochial, there's a parcel of land in my ward that's owned by a guy that sits in Jersey. He's a 92-year-old. I've been out there last year to try and track him down. But his company, would be probably would warm to the fact of building them on that land. He owns it anyway, and let him rent it out. There are landowners along the Dock Road who are looking to invest in that. So I get what you're saying, Nicola, and I see it's not happening quick enough. I mean, the WDA was scrapped as a quango. It was the most successful out of the 291 quangos in Wales at the time. That was the most successful one. Dare I say it, the Welsh government scrapped that one first. Lower Beole, where we go in. But yeah, we got to get the start to small businesses is a major factor now. You start them up, it brings economy and prosperity to the borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Well said. Yeah, I think we're all in agreement there within the chamber and online. Thank you. Next up in the chamber, could I have Councillor Charlotte Goldsworthy, please?
You'll all be relieved I haven't got any questions, but I just want to come back to the good news, the levelling fund, and I think it's only right. I believe that Carly Davis has a lot to do with the successful bid, was there? So I just think it's right to basically give a big thank you to Carly, because obviously on the back of that obviously can safeguard jobs and everything else as well. So well done to Carly and the rest of the people, but obviously I think she was a key person, yeah.
Hey, thank you, Charlotte. I think we all agree with that as well. Yeah, excellent job. Fair play to all involved. Oh, sorry, bring Nicola in a sec. Sorry.
I just wanted to say, Carly has done an excellent job contributing to the bid that we put in. But it was Lisa who was running those bids, and it was Lisa and her colleagues, as well as Carly, as well as people who were operating the Knoll, and the private sector also contributed to that bid. So it was a team approach, and yeah.
Could you use the mic, please? Turn the mic on.
People and staff that are not in the chamber be recognised as well, and I think that's key. From obviously the cleaner all the way up, because sometimes they don't know about that. So I just want to think it's important to give recognition to all staff that have contributed. And I only obviously I know obviously of Lisa, but I also know of Carly. Yeah.
Thank you, Charlotte. I think, I say they all, after the news last night, fantastic news, really. You know. I have one final one on my list. Councillor Ken Phillips, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question, really, on the consultation itself, with reference to Appendix 6, the pre-consultation suggestions. We have the list of suggestions from staff and public there. What we don't have at this stage are actually any answers to the points made. At the end of this whole consultation process, will we have a clear document that answers all of those suggestions and the suggestions coming in the consultation point by point, so that the public can see clearly that we've taken their ideas on board, we've considered them, decided to do some, decided not to do others for various reasons, but actually setting it out clearly in a public, a clear format for the public to see that we're actually listening, with a view to higher participation in future consultation exercises.
Thank you, Ken. Back to Hugh then, please.
The answer is yes. In one word, you will have that in the final document.
Thank you, Hugh. Anything else, Councillor Phillips?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Councillor Rob Jones would like to come back in, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just picking up on a couple of the answers. First of all, it was remiss of me not to thank Andrew Jarrett at the last meeting when we talked about, I'm sorry, Karen, talked about the redeployment of buildings. Officers have already been in contact with Frodrick House, so I'm grateful for that with early discussions. Something that Nicola said in relation to the 2.8 million, I don't think at the moment anyone in the room is fully clear in relation to that. But one of the items on the additional documentation, which covers the reserve schedule for environment, on page 3 of that document, because Mrs. Pearce alluded to the fact that the 2.8 could be used for the vehicle renewals. It actually says vehicle renewals. There's uncommitted £3.7 million for vehicle renewals. How will that tie in with the 2.8?
Nicola?
We've got a renewal fund that we've always got in place. So there is a reserve always there because we buy vehicles, we use them, they come to the end of their life, and then we replace them with new vehicles. The problem that we have is the sort of fossil fuel vehicles, so the diesels and the petrol vehicles are a heck of a lot cheaper than the low emission vehicles. So your hydrogen vehicles and your electric vehicles are significantly more expensive to purchase. So we're struggling to actually secure the funding to purchase or lease these vehicles because of that cost differential. So this money will enable us to continue with our fleet renewal and improvement plans that we already and have been doing for a number of years.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Okay, can I bring Chief Executive Karen in, please?
I just add, because I think it might give members a bit more assurance as well, because what the focus is today is obviously on the budget that we need to set for next year, the next 12 months. There are a number of other very significant pieces of work that we are doing that will come back to members as part of trying to balance that next 4-year period. So one of those will be a transport review. So what size of fleet will we need? What type of vehicles? As we talked in the member seminar about things like the fitness for purpose of the depots and so on. So I'm conscious that what you're looking at today is a set of proposals that are just to balance the budget for next year. But just to say to you is there's a whole lot of other work that's going to come forward. We've referred in the meeting, I think, to subsequent phases of an accommodation review. So there will be a lot more information coming forward. And I think, members got a really key role there in shaping those proposals, because it's going to be fundamentally important in terms of how much service and to what standard we're going to be able to provide them going forward, given the scale of the change that we need to be embracing to get from where we are today to a different place. And there's a whole, set of things in there you've referred to today, you know, the discretionary services, we need to find another way of funding them so they're not dependent on council tax. So there'll be a lot more discussion, I think, around income generation returning to that agenda. So just conscious that we're looking at 12 months, but actually there will be a lot more information that will be coming forward over the next period around the direction going forward. Lots of comments, really relevant comments about making sure that the public understand what this is. So we will absolutely take that on board. And I think what we'll probably do is some explainer stuff that will go out additional to the documentation you've already seen to try and sort of explain in plain English. So when we're talking about accommodation, what we're actually meaning is this, and trying to put it in terms that people will be able to understand in terms of their own context as well. So just to give you that bit of additional assurance.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Jones, would you like to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for those answers. But staying with your directorate, Mrs. Pearce, I didn't realise that Councillor Crowley was a professional stalker going to Jersey to trace someone for industrial units. What I will say is your predecessor was pitched an idea for the Swansea Valley in relation to the Coalfield Trust, where they would be prepared to build units at no cost of the authority to increase the industrial capacity in those areas. And it's something that clearly is required. I know we've lost planning applications because we haven't had further information. So that is certainly part of what we will be contributing towards the contribution for the consultation. But I wanted people to make aware, and I think you are aware of it as well. I don't know if you want to come back on that. I go one final point then, Chair.
Yeah, Nicola.
Thank you. Yeah, we've been in touch with the Coalfields Trust, and we actually arranged a meeting with them together with Councillor Reynolds in relation to potential interest that they would have up in the former East Pit site. So they are very interested in developing this area, and not only can they use their own funds, but they can lever in funds from other areas which we can't get our hands on. So you know, those are discussions that we're going to continue to have with them, so that we can maximise the opportunities in those areas where we haven't been able to invest in the past. So yes, we've reignited that sort of relationship with the Coalfields Trust, and we will continue to work with them to get the best outcomes.
Thank you, Nicola. Sounds very encouraging. Councillor Jones?
Yeah, final point from me, Chair. I think it's become very clear, and it's been alluded to by the Chief Exec in relation to the clarity of the message that needs to go out for the consultation here within the members of our community. Use of language and terminology. Matthew alluded to the fact of acronyms and so on and so forth. The information contained in the consultation document has been echoed throughout the chamber and for those online as the clarity that's required. The current state of the document does not have that clarity that we would seek as members. So having said that, we will support the recommendation to go forward, and I'm prepared to propose that we send the Cabinet the recommendation to go out to consult, with that caveat that we will reserve judgment on the outcome because of perhaps not understanding the documentation that's gone.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Are there any further questions on this item, please? Councillor James Henton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Hugh. Can you confirm if in recent years there were any underspends and whether those underspends were put back into reserves?
Yes, they were underspends in previous years, and yes, they would have found their way back into reserves. I can't tell you how many years going back because my memory is not that great, but certainly the last couple of years we've underspent and put significant amount into reserves, yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I think we're giving it due diligence on this run this afternoon. Thank you for all the contributions. We'll move now. The recommendations are listed on page 19 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. I've already had a proposer from Councillor Rob Jones. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Carol Clement Williams. Thank you. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain, please?
I can't see any abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Charlotte. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I don't see anyone against, Chair, so that has gone through to Cabinet.
Okay, that has been put through to Cabinet. Thank you very much, everyone. Leads us on to item 6, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund approval of strategy anchor projects. We're leading into this as we have a presentation, please, by Lisa Willis, please.
Can I come in first, Chair?
Oh, sorry, Nicola?
Yes, sorry. Lisa has a presentation for you all. You'll see from the report, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund has identified an opportunity for us to spend just over £28.5 million in terms of core funding, together with just shy of £6 million in terms of multiply funding. And multiply funding is aimed at improving the numerical and mathematical skills of our community, or people within our communities. As part of this fund, we propose to invest in 5 anchor projects. And Lisa now will take you through those anchor projects and the aims and objectives of them. And please feel free to ask any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Lisa, if you'd like to take over from there, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So it's quite a long report, and because it's a new funding programme, I've picked out some key elements from the report to go through today, and also some key elements of the 5 anchor projects. So that's my index. So the UK Shared Prosperity Fund is one of the funds within the UK government's Levelling Up agenda. And as Nicola mentioned, we've been successful in the Levelling Up Fund for the Vale of Neath Heritage Corridor. That was a very competitive fund. The difference between the Levelling Up Funds and the Shared Prosperity Fund is that the Shared Prosperity Fund, we've got an allocation, and each local authority area across the UK has an allocation. It's a mix of capital and revenue, and it's looking at local delivery and local leadership and local decision making. It replaces some aspects, not all aspects, of European structural funds, and is looking at building pride in place, supporting quality skills, training, supporting pay, employment, productivity, growth, and also increasing life chances. We've got an allocation. So Nicola mentioned we have 28 million core, but there's a top slice for some administration. Swansea Council are the lead, but they've redistributed some of the admin budget. So we've got 27.3 million in total to be spent by March 25, which is a very ambitious spend timeline. So it's basically 2 years. We've also got a separate allocation for multiply, which Nicola mentioned is adult numeracy. And that's 5.7. That's quite a lot of money under multiply. The investment priorities for shared prosperity funds, so we need to spend them in line with investment priorities, which are quite flexible. There's one for community and place, one for supporting local business, and one for people and skills. In terms of governance, there's local governance and local decision making, and the local decision making is via cabinet. But we've also got local partnership structure in place, and that is we've evolved the economic forum, so we've got a mixture of public, third and private sectors, FE and HE represented on that group, and they're a reference group, they're a consultation group, they're not decision making. In terms of regional governance, we've got regional local authority directors, which are ensuring there's a consistent approach across the region, and there's regional visibility of the projects, and Nicola sits on that group. And there's also a feed into the corporate joint committees, and this needs to be explored further because the regional local authority directors will feed into the corporate joint committees. There's also regional coordination. So I meet regularly with Swansea Council, my equivalent in Swansea Council, Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire to ensure there's consistency. In terms of reporting, we're going to be as open and transparent and ensuring that Cabinet receives progress reports and looking at any flexibility that we need to give to the programme, so that's the governance. You've seen and you approved the investment plan last year, and that was finally approved by UK government in December this year. There's been quite a few delays in a number of things, but that investment plan is a regional investment plan, but our local investment plan fed into that. And our local investment plan is aligned to our corporate plan for Neath Talbot, our local economic recovery plans, the regional learning and skill plans, and our public service board assessments. And we did consult widely on that investment plan, and that is available publicly. In terms of implementation, it's a very big program to manage in terms of compliance, partnerships, applications. But we've got the application process and guidance now finalised. That was this week was finalised. We're ensuring regional consistency. We need to focus on local delivery, and we need to focus on addressing and respond to our local challenges and opportunities. And I hope when we get to the anchor projects, you'll see that they do address our local priorities. So there's a number of delivery options. There's the main areas of shared prosperity are going to be funded by anchor projects. We've got a number of grant schemes which are within the anchor projects, and there's about £9 million worth of grants within those anchor projects, which are going to be available for all sectors. There's also going to be a standalone project and commission project. So to ensure a coordinated approach, we've gone down the anchor project route, that's consistent with the region and also the rest of Wales. So I'm the lead for Shared Prosperity Fund. Nicola is the SRO, so the Senior Responsible Officer for the Shared Prosperity Fund. And I just need to mention again, deliverability by about March 25. In terms of consultation, you've got that in the report. We've consulted and engaged as widely as we can in the timescales. And we're going to be, to ensure that the public know everything there is to know about Shared Prosperity Fund, we're going to have communication engagement plan and also web pages. So I'm going to get on to the anchor projects, which is what we're here for. So we're going to have a targeted approach. They're going to deliver key areas of the investment plan, and they're going to be coordinated by my team. So we're going to ensure there's synergy and there's no duplication between the anchor projects within the council. And the grant schemes I'm going to talk about will be open to all eligible organisations. And just to let you know, the anchor projects, we've consulted on the anchor projects. So, for example, Julie Davis and the team have consulted with Business Wales, with the Federation of Small Business, with Compass on the anchor projects. That's just one example of the business. So I take a breath. And we're going to look at the Place Anchor project. And Nicola mentioned earlier in the previous agenda item, so there's 4 interlinked projects within the Place Anchor project. There's Valley Industrial Units. And just you would have received the application forms last Friday. The Annex A's, which are huge spreadsheets, they're available on request. So I'm quite happy to talk through those. So the Valley's industrial units, we've got Aberavon. So there's 3 proposed at the moment, which is Nantcavern, Glencorrwg, Nicola mentioned Glencorrwg, and no, sorry, didn't, Cwmgorth and Glencorrwg. And they're, because we've got the deliverability by March 25, they're the ones we know we can get off the ground and we can build by March 25. But we are collating evidence, which is my last slide, to inform future funding programmes. So we're keeping evidence of demand, need and demand, so we can be ready to go with future funding programmes. Aberavon Seafront Master Plan. We've got a fund for Neath, Talbot Heritage, Culture and Tourism to deliver our Heritage, Culture and Tourism strategy. We've also got a Place marketing campaign, which is going to be led by Carly and the team, and that will hopefully now market our wonderful news about the Vale of Neath Heritage Corridor, and ensure there's more overnight stays and there's increased visitor economy in Neath Talbot. So the officer lead for this project is Andrew Collins and the team, and the total project cost is approximately 6.3 million. So that's anchor project number 1. Chair, shall I stop after each project? Shall I carry on and take questions at the end?
I think we'll take questions at the end, I think, Lisa. Yeah, thank you.
Anchor project number 2 is Valleys and Villages. We've been quite restricted with regeneration funding in the past because of Welsh Government with the Town Centre First policy. So this is our opportunity to focus on the valleys and villages, and we've got a fund which is going to be open to public, private and third sectors. There's a list of criteria on the application forms you received, and it's to create sustainable growth in our valley communities. We're aiming to launch it in spring. We're hoping April to launch it. We're getting the criteria documentation ready, and if we can launch it before that, we will launch before that. Our officer lead is Andrew Collins and the team, and the total project cost is 2 million for that. So that's 2 million fund project activity to finish by December 24. Our third anchor project is looking at our sustainable communities, and there are 4 projects here. And there's a Sustainable Communities Growth Fund, which is a focus on poverty activities and also equalities. And that's going to be led by Angeline Spooner-Cleverley and the team. That's £1 million worth of funding for public, third sector and private sector organisations. Then we've got a third sector growth fund, which complements our third sector Neath Talbot scheme, and that's going to be led by the Neath Talbot CVS. They've successfully run a community renewal fund project looking at grants, and they were really over. The demand for that fund was incredible. There's also a third element to this anchor, which is looking at coordinating poverty and developing a poverty action plan, and also youth engagement and looking at tackling youth homelessness, as well as supporting our young people within the communities. So that total project cost is 3 million, but the majority of that is going out in grants. Then we've got an enhanced business support for growth and innovation. It's a bit of a long title. And that's led by Julie Davis and the team. And that is looking at supporting our businesses. And that will have a £3 million growth fund for businesses. And they can apply. And just to give one example of how this can be used to complement other projects. So we've had European structural funds and City Deal to build the Bay Technology Centre on Bagland Energy Park. The lab space there is sort of basic lab space, but this fund, potentially, we could attract people looking to our research development and innovation. They can have some funding from this to kit out the labs. We're looking at the flow, so the floating offshore wind supply chain, looking at clean growth hubs, and also looking at supporting our innovation and economic opportunities. There's quite a lot in that fund. And then the Anchor Project 5 is employability. So building on Communities for Work Plus, building on Workways Plus, and building on the Community Renewal Fund projects. This is holistic, whole council approach to employability, from school-age people up into the older age of the spectrum, looking at in-work support, preparing people for work, paid work opportunities, and early engagement. Kerry Jones, an education leader in that, and it's 5.5 million. In terms of next steps, subject to Cabinet approval of the Anchor projects, we will start delivery of those projects. We will launch the grant schemes, ensure every across the county borough is aware of those grant schemes. Then we've got to look at skills. So there's an allocation for skills. But previously, we've looked at regional working for skills because, of course, we've got loads of colleges, we've got FE, HE. So we're looking at how to work on that. We've got about £3 million worth for the skills, which we've allocated for skills. Multiply, we're waiting for information from UK government on Multiply. And then we've got a bit of money set aside for an open call to target those areas which haven't been covered by the Anchor projects. We will have robust monitoring in place so we can look at outputs and outcomes. We'll ensure compliant delivery, so my team will ensure compliant delivery. We will look to evaluate how well the projects are done, and also mention about gathering evidence of future funding. In terms of timeline, it's been a really quick turnaround because UK government didn't launch the fund until spring last year, and then we had the investment plan approved December, just before Christmas, and we need to deliver by the end of December 24. We've got a dedicated email address, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Very clear there. Moving on to questions from members. We'll firstly take any public questions. Then if there are any questions relating to Appendix 3 of our reports, we'll move to them in private session, if that's okay. Can I ask, has anybody got any questions in the public sector first, please? Okay. Councillor Goldsworthy, please.
Part of the document is the public places, is it? Yeah. I think in general, across all of them, to be honest, what my concern is like we were discussing earlier, for the last 30, 40 years, it's been the same sort of systems of how, grants are given out, who they're given out to. Is still a massive lack of mapping areas, needs, and things like that. And when you've explained things, it's the regional people who, sit on the board of this, the board of that. But as a councillor, very rare I ever see any of them actually in my ward to actually know what the details of what my ward actually needs. So I know we've got certain staff. It's like last night, we go on about, we got workways, communities at work. people are totally confused about the number of people. It used to just be the Job Centre Plus. You go to Job Centre Plus and people knew what was on the tin. Yesterday, I came across a new one, so I don't know if anyone actually knows who they are. Work Wales. So they now have just booked rooms in the library up in Carmarthen, and they're doing exactly what the upstairs staff do. So it's like, for me, where's the year? Yeah, massive. People have not got no idea of what it is, and that's a concern. So I know obviously the way in which government grants and that work, and it's put in under these headings and everything else. But I think the problem we've got is that sometimes we need to look and develop the detail from the bottom up, then say this is what we actually need. It's not the top telling us what they're going to do. And I think that's a major issue. So until we sort of address them type of systems, and I don't mean to be negative, because I'll be the first one when something's not working, but I get stressed out by having to run after people all the time. Do you know what I mean? So I don't want them pressures. It's just been Christmas, I'm still in chill zone. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Goldsworthy.
Really,
Yeah.
but I appreciate all the work and everything.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsworthy. Nicola, if you could come in here, please.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of employability, I understand completely what you're saying. It's a service that has been split across our education service and our economic development service in the past. So it's been sort of split. It's been a split service, and we've acknowledged for some time that it has to come under one director and one head of service, and that move is taking place. Under the corporate plan, we've got a number of we've got 4 objectives, and the 4th objective is jobs and skills. And that is obviously aimed at trying to maximise the opportunities that we are creating for the people who are living or working within Neath Talbot. Now, in terms of the employability service, we have identified that we need one front door, because people who are looking for either training or access to new jobs are being directed in a number of different places. And it takes a lot of guts for somebody to come forward and say, I need your help. I want to get a job, or I want to get some additional training to enable me to get access to those better, more fulfilling jobs. So that has taken a huge amount of courage to come forward for, asking for that help. And we need to ensure that we don't say, oh, thank you very much, but you need to go over there, or you need to go to that organisation. We need to hold their hand and take them through that process. So that's something that we're actually doing at the moment under that jobs and skills objective 4. And under this new employability proposal, it'll be a one-stop shop under one umbrella, and we will hopefully get people to the right places, give them the training that they need, and ensure that they've got access to those jobs. But critical to that, ensuring that bottom-up approach, we need to make sure that the business community that is either here at the moment or will be evolving in the future, we need to ensure that we are designing courses that are fit for those businesses. We don't want to be churning out courses for which there are no opportunities for the people who are undertaking those courses going forward. We need to ensure that our training offer is aligned with the jobs that our business community are providing. So that is another piece of work that is all come under this umbrella, and all comes under the employability service and the jobs and skills theme. So hopefully we will address the concerns that you've got, and you won't have to run around and
If I can just come back, it's something what you say is like, it's the one-stop shop basically. And it's also about the courses that they want to do. So for instance, within 20 minutes last week, I put a post out about a food hygiene course. I've got to look for doing another food hygiene course. And that's 24 people. Do you know what I mean? So that was just in 20 minutes, and they're still coming in. So when you look at, for all different reasons they wanted to do it, then obviously what we've got lots of issues going forward from COVID recovery and that from the social services point of view, and the lack of sometimes the professionals in there. And it's like what I don't see ever being advertised, and lots of people are asking questions, but they never know how. So if they want to look at coming from a certain role, maybe like someone as admin, might want to go into sort of counselling, or, you know, not our counselling, but, you know, well, it's all the same really to me, but it's, you know, life coaching and things like that. They don't know how to go about it. So sometimes it's looking at the professions that we ourselves as services need. It's not just the local businesses, it's actually what do we need as a local authority going forward as well. And I think, you know, that is another way, you know, idea go, I don't know, it might happen and I'm just not seeing it.
Thank you, Charlotte. Can I bring in our Chief Executive, Karen, please?
I absolutely agree with what you said about our existing workforce. So one of the things that Sheena's looking at the moment is how do we create those pathways internally to enable people to progress in our organisation and maybe retrain to do completely different jobs. So when we think about the labour market we've got at the moment, where it's incredibly difficult to recruit and retain into a whole variety of jobs because there's just fewer people looking for work at the moment than we are trying to recruit. We've got an ageing workforce. So when you look forward, there are going to be more people probably looking to retire. So part of what's in the proposals here is some of those people might want to look at flexible retirement maybe. But I think we've got a lot of people as well at the bottom end of our structure. And certainly before Christmas, when I was talking to staff, it's evident that people even in work are experiencing all sorts of financial hardship. But one of the things that you can do to get yourself out of that position is to try to move to a position which is paid better. So you should expect us this year to be starting to look at what more we can do to retrain and reskill people within our own organisation, as well as some of the work that we'll be doing then through the employability programmes in the community. So you're absolutely spot on there, Charlotte.
Last but not least, and this is a totally random one, but me and Suzanne actually went to a seminar in Cardiff last night. What was it? Tough. I got it. Yeah, and it was all about ADHD, and it was absolutely phenomenal, wasn't it? And I was quite shocked that there wasn't basically like a riot in there, because once someone starts talking, normally you can't stop them. But it was really good. And one of the things, it was speaking around students and how students, the pressure on students with ADHD, if they've been diagnosed, if they were on like Ritalin or, you know, things like that, and how they can, you know, look at doing a lot of creative work. That's, you know, they are the problem solvers and things like this. But normally the ones with the ADHD are classed as the troublemakers, or, you know, just the ones that people don't listen to until they got to prove themselves. But it's like, I think that market now of the neurodiverse families and friends and things like that are coming out. And it was interesting to see and hear from the speaker, how the students, if they're on certain medication, then totally focus on being able to write and express strategies and everything like that. And I would be really keen at the workforce and that, and look at the workforce, how maybe could be more work around the awareness raising as well, in that type of thing as well. Do you know what I mean? But I think you'll agree, it was really interesting to see from a different point of view how the brain can work within people of all. And I think, you know, going forward, that's a big thing, I think, gonna be there. And I know it's totally random off the report, but it is something that, you know, is there.
Thank you, Charlotte. That's a really good, well-made point. I thank you for that. I'm delighted to hear that as far as the staffing and training and comes, having been in education for 32 years and 10 years as head of careers, that we finally got an organisation where we're going to be put everything together in one-stop shop, because it is a minefield out there for youngsters, even with, you know, who haven't got neurodiverse and things. So anything where we can have one simple system will, in my mind, is that it will be an excellent thing. Thank you. Next, Councillor Carol Clement Williams, please.
Just I got 4 points. Just Charlotte did mention, I didn't catch what you call them, the Welsh Government Workability, is it?
No, it was called Wales Work.
Wales Work. So I'm not sure that was covered, but are we making sure that we're not doing the same work as they are? And if so, because I mean, if they are doing it, shouldn't we work with them or let them take that on? That was one. Shall I leave that one go or just ask them all and then?
We'll bring Lisa in there, Carol, is that right? Thanks.
Thanks for the question. So we have done a mapping exercise about what people need to get into a job or to retrain, and also what's out there, what provisions out there to make sure we don't duplicate the content. We need to, it's public money, we need to make sure we maximise public money, don't duplicate. So we are aware of what's going on in terms of Welsh Government funded for employability. And as Nicola said, we're trying to do a joint approach with one front door and signposting as well. So if we can't do it, we'll signpost them to somebody else. So we won't keep everybody to ourselves. So yeah, so those measures are in place, but thanks for flagging that up.
That's
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Back to you, Carol.
Thank you. So when Karen mentioned about the reskilling, excuse me, I think that we need to look at multi-skilling as well. So doing things maybe not just reskilling after the fact, but to look at sort of overlapping some skills in different roles as well. I've covered the Welsh Government one. The question, I've mentioned this a number of times since being a councillor, never really got much of a response on it. For me, when I was in school, we picked our, and it's under here, you mentioned the educational part of it, but we had to pick all of our subjects with no careers advice at all. And then we had the career advice a year after we'd already started doing the subjects. So it's about having that timely careers advice that worries me around young people and deciding what, because I ask my grandchildren, right, and they haven't got a clue what they want to do. And they're halfway through the secondary schools system. And I just think that we need to speak to them about what they like doing and what makes them tick far earlier, because academia isn't for everyone. Although obviously they need the basics and what have you. Some people just really aren't interested. A lot of people would just prefer to be outdoors and so it's about capturing all that quite early so we can steer people. The earlier the better for me, because the younger you are, the quicker you pick up skills. That would be my input. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Carol. Excellent. Nicola, if you'd like to come back.
Yeah, that's something that we've been looking at as well, because young people don't respond to the in the same way perhaps we did when we were their age. We've been talking about how if a child, or a pupil I should say, if a pupil is good at geography or another subject, is, do they can they visualize what type of job would use the skills and the issues that you would cover in a subject such as geography? They probably wouldn't. So sometimes you've got to sort of have businesses who are either working in the area at the moment or are looking to come in to say, this is what we do, and the skills that we're looking for can be secured if you study X, Y, and Z. So you need to give the young people or pupils, or even those who are looking to retrain, an understanding of how they can relate that particular subject interest into a career. And we've been talking about how platforms such as TikTok, I'll pretend to know what it is. My kids talk about it all the time. TikTok and all those other sort of social media streaming channels, how we can potentially use that to engage young people and to get them to understand how the skills that they've got or the interests they've got can be relatable to a specific career. And we're also talking about how businesses may well be able to make films saying, this is what we do and these are the type of people that we need. Have you got those sort of interests and skills and qualities? If you have, we want to hear from you. So if we create those sort of videos, these businesses haven't got time to go to every single school in NPT, but if they produce a video, we can get it out on a platform and we can reach every single school within NPT. So it's about a different way of operating, a different way of actually getting our message across. And if we do all of those activities, then we'll reach more young people and those looking to retrain to secure the best outcomes for them.
Lovely, thank you, Nicola. Come back, Carol. Yeah.
Sorry, there was another thing that I forgot to mention. That, I mean, I know it sounds really stupid, but if anybody watched Silent Witness last night, there are jobs out there that we never ever envisaged when we were younger. One of them is like being influencers. There's a lot of money that can be made on that. I'm just wondering if we've thought of it. I don't need an answer, but have we thought of it? And what kind of, because in that programme last night, it went really wrong. Because these people are under a horrific pressure to perform to whatever extent they're an influencer in. And I think we need to start picking that up in our education system, because some people might look at it and think, oh, there was another famous case in America where a young girl was an influencer and she ended up getting murdered in the end. People look at these people and think their lives are perfect, and they're not. And I'm just wondering if we can capture that as well. I don't need an answer, Chair, but I just wanted to bring that in.
Thank you, Carol. Next on my list, Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Councillor Percy, you're just on mute.
Apologies, sorry about that. Yeah, just wanted to come in, I guess, briefly on the discussion we've been having around skills and young people, and I guess that the point is around trying to inspire young people. I guess is where we need to get to. It's one thing to sort of engage or to attempt to engage, but I think the discussion we've had around social media is sort of flagging up where perhaps the public sector is struggling to capture that inspiration of young people, whereas there's lots of content out there and influencers and other people that are doing that. So I think we have got to sort of look at that a little bit differently. But the point I was going to raise was just really quickly on the Aberafon Seafront Master Plan. Should be no surprise to officers that I wanted to mention that. Obviously, really pleased to see that included within the report as one of the as part of one of the anchor projects. What I did want, though, just to flag up is and to try and seek some reassurance that local members will be fully involved. There's an issue I've raised many times before, which is the Aberafon Seafront Steering Group, which is quoted within the document. It is local members are not part of that group, and I would just want some reassurance that we'll be fully involved in the preparation of that plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I'll bring Karen in, please.
The short answer, Sean, is yes. As you know, we've got Chris Saunders joining us on the 20th of February. I think that's the date Andrew mentioned earlier. And in that job, we brought together all of the responsibility for tourism, leisure, heritage and culture. So he'll hold the ring, if you like, around that. And I specifically, following the points you made to me with Ted and with Matthew, made sure that responsibility for coordinating the activities in the Aberafon Seafront are vested in that particular job. So you've got a go-to person who's going to try and bring all of that together for you. So I think the governance, once Chris gets in place in terms of how we make sure members, officers, partners are all working together, and that is something that Chris could usefully review with people's suggestions as to how we can make sure we are on the best possible footing going forward. So hopefully that gives you some assurances, but obviously he's going to need to sort of find his feet and bed in a bit, but that's kind of the ambition around it all.
Thank you, Karen. Is everything okay there, Councillor Percy?
Yeah, appreciate that. Happy. Thank you. Deal.
Thank you. Last two questions I think we'll take on this now. Councillor Paddison, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm reminded of the film Field of Dreams. If you build it, people will come, and it just goes to show that for the whole life I've been a councillor, we've always just been, how can we manage and do more with less and less and less? And when we get a sum of money like this, albeit that it's ring fence for certain projects, I have the utmost confidence in our officers, because I know that that's all they've been waiting for, is the wherewithal to get out there and actually do their job, because they've been hamstringed by not having funding for so long now. I'm absolutely thrilled, and I'm really optimistic that we will, with our officers, get the most bang out of the buck that is absolutely possible, because they are top notch. I will just go on to say, I'm absolutely thrilled that Charlotte mentioned yesterday evening, because you know, there was upwards of 1,000 people possibly in a room, and it was Professor Sedgwick who gave the talk for us and made me realise, and this is why I'm going to make a plea now. Now I'm in a position to do so, that people on the spectrum don't do well in school. A lot of our permanent exclusions can eventually end up being people with no job, but the potential that they have for work in a different way because of the way their mind works, they could become our entrepreneurs of the future. So if at all possible, could we take part of what we know and think of that type of person? Because we already know in our education system there are people who have got statements for ADHD, autism spectrum, disabilities. Well, I hate to call it disabilities because after last night, it's not a disability, it's just a different way of working. But please, can we take on board that if we use TikTok or if we use other videos and put them on YouTube and other platforms, which I don't even know about, these people will know about them and they will find the opportunities and they will come forward because they are also chomping at the bit for an opportunity to show what they can do. So if we as a council take on board their kind of mindset at all opportunities, not just with jobs, but across the board, I'm sure that it will benefit the residents of Neath Talbot and further. So I just wanted to put a plug out there for anybody who's struggling to find a way in the world of so-called normal people, that they may find a home in Neath Talbot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Good point, well made. Thank you. Final question, and then please, or observation from Councillor Rob Jones, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm actually delighted to hear that the variety of employability is finally coming together after 4 years of pleading that it should come together, particularly when the two directorates were competing for grant aid and knocking each other out because they were applying to the same organisation and negated each other. The only question that I have, having heard that good news, is what directorate will now sit under, because it was education and another. So it's just for clarity, where will it actually sit in the hierarchy of the authority?
Thank you, Rob. I'd like to bring Aaron back in, please.
With Chris Millis, it is, Rob, that's what we've decided. So he's your go-to person in terms of employability, and it brings it together with skills and training more generally.
Right. I just need to ask now, obviously, we've exhausted, I think, all the observations and questions on the first part. Does anybody here have any questions on Appendix 3? If so, we'll have to move into private session. I can't see anyone here who wants to bring anything up on Appendix 3. So we'll just move. We'll just move to the recommendation, sorry. They are listed on page 76 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. Can I please have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Proposed, Chair.
Proposed by James Henton, please, seconded by Councillor Rob Jones. Thank you very much. Can any members indicate if they wish to abstain?
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Chair.
Thank you all. I will take it to Cabinet. Agenda item 6, urgent items. I have no urgent items. That brings the meeting to an end. We're at the end of the schedule. Thank you everyone for all the contributions this afternoon. Diolch yn fawr, poib, and hope to see you again shortly. Thank you all.
Thank you.